This is the Hyte Thicc Q60, the thickest boy you will be able to find right now. That thing is so freaking fat. Next to it, an Arctic liquid freezer looks like it has gone on a diet. But that's really not all. This is not only the thickest radiator I have ever seen on an AIO before, but there are also some of the thickest PC fans out there installed on it. And because that still wasn't enough flex, we got a full-blown 5-inch screen, cause why not? Now, that thing is special. Hyte has put a lot of work in it, and it's a very complicated topic, so let's just start at the beginning. The Hyte Thicc Q60 comes in a box that already tells you that we are going to go all rainbow fairy dust today, and judging by its size, you can also already assume what's going on. And don't forget that cables are gross, so Hyte got rid of them. Inside this behemoth we will find a completely pre-assembled AIO, as well as the necessary mounting hardware for all nowadays relevant sockets. To get this thing going on Intel, we need to position the appropriate backplate with spacers behind the motherboard and screw in the standoffs from the other side. The Intel brackets are already on the Waterblock pump combo, so don't worry about that. Over on AMD we need to remove the Intel brackets by pulling them away and replace them with the AMD ones. On the motherboard side we need to remove the pre-installed retention brackets and replace them with the AMD standoffs. To install the cooler onto the chip, we got these 4 screws, and to get all of them in, we will need to swivel the screen around a bit left, a bit right, and don't forget that you want all the screws to go down at somewhat the same pace. So a few rotations left and right, swivel that screen around and do like an X pattern and rinse and repeat. And yes, I know it's kinda annoying. As a last step, we still need to connect everything. So take that USB cable, connect it next to the tube, and on the other side we need a 6-pin PCIe for power, cause you know, thick boys require a lot of power, and the USB 2.0 to your motherboard. With the installation covered, let's get to the different aspects of this individually, cause there is so much to cover here. Starting off with the fans. These are Hyte's separately available thick FP12 fans. These are ridiculous monsters. They are 32mm thick, they feature a 7-blade design, and all of them are using Hyte's cableless connection system, which in this particular case doesn't really matter because all of them are pre-connected anyway out of the box, but they are spinning at a ridiculous 3000 RPM whilst pushing 105.8 CFM at up to 8.14 millimeters of H2O, which is absolutely ridiculous. Now, one of the more interesting things Hyte did here, these are installed to be pulling air through the radiator or into the case essentially, which is definitely different. Usually we see AIO manufacturers doing it the other way around, but not on here. And there is a reason for it and we will get to it in a minute. Behind these chunks we will find an even thicker chunk. This 53mm thick 240mm sized radiator. This one is about 16 FPI, so it's not particularly dense, but at 53mm thickness it's like by far the thickest radiator I have ever seen on an AIO. And combined with the fans, we are looking at a total of 85mm worth of cooling. Now you are going to need to find a case that can do this. Thankfully, Hyte has a document at the bottom of the product page which lists a whole bunch of cases, and if you can mount the AIO, you got a bunch of well-known names there like Be Quiet Ones, Cooler Master, Corsair, Fractal, and so on. And then you got some maybes, which is okay. But for all the maybes, and just like every case in general, just see if you got that 85mm. Make sure that your GPU is not going to get hit if you mount it sideways or in the front, and then you should be fine. Alternatively, if you're planning to mount this at the top of the case, beware. You can turn the fans around, nobody is stopping you, but the USB cable could become a problem. Cause most motherboards will have the USB 2.0 headers at the bottom of the board, and in this case it might be too short, you might not reach it. So in that one particular case you will need an extension. Compatibility in general, let's be honest, it's an issue, but that was kind of foreseeable. This thing is thick, it's chunky, but I don't really see it as a problem. This thing wasn't made for everything. It's cool that Hyte released that list, they did everybody a favor here, and of course you can do whatever you want. Even if that thing is white, or most of it is white, it is not Apple, so nobody is going to break your hands because you are mixing companies. But this thing was made for Hyte cases. The Y40, Y60 and Y70 all feature that sidewise intake, which coincidentally has more than enough gap to make an AIO this thick fit without hitting the GPU. What a coincidence. So yeah, you can do whatever you want, but if you want to be sure that this thing will fit, Hyte's own cases are kind of the way to go. And let's just be honest, this combo does look kind of awesome. The tubes that are coming out next to the glowing Hyte logo are just as chunky as the rest of this thing. At about 17mm thickness, these are like the thickest tubes I have seen. But don't be fooled. Where somebody like Arctic likes to hide ARGB and PWM cables in their tubes, Hyte had to go onto a whole other level because there is some sort of screen cable or display cable going through. So the actual tubes are in fact much thinner. The tubes are about 350 to 400mm long. It really depends on where you stop measuring, because on the Waterblock end we got these 45 degrees rotatable fittings. Now the length is sufficient for the Hyte Y60. In this particular case it works just fine. But the cable will to some degree rest on the GPU, which just isn't perfect. And it's not that big of a deal in that particular case, because there the GPU will be vertical anyway, so you have that additional help from the bottom. But if you're using some other case, or if you want to mod the Y60 to have like a regular horizontal GPU, you might get into trouble that a longer set of tubes would have prevented. And now let's get to the elephant in the room. This 5-inch IPS display. It's got an array of 42 LEDs behind it to get some of that back glow going, and you can turn it a bit to the left and to the right, and you can show off all kinds of stuff here. From GIFs to static images and even useful stuff like the water temperature of the freaking loop as it goes in or out. It's ridiculous. And you have animations that go along. Oh, and actually, because nothing is happening, this is kind of the room temperature right now. Cool. And there is so much going on in here that Hyte had to install a separate mini system. There is actually a whole ARM CPU hidden somewhere in here. What the hell? Of course it's a gimmick. It's not like this is going to give you any sort of performance benefit, but it does look kinda cool. Showing off that CPU temperature or how much everything is being cooled, I get that, and it would be my thing. And depending on where your case is standing, you can always turn the screen towards yourself, which is actually really cool, but it's always going to stay in this orientation, or at least for now, with the tubes at the bottom and the screen coming essentially down. Maybe at some point that update will come where we can rotate it and then we can install it like turned around, but right now this is the only thing we can do. And to control all of this, we got the Nexus software. Now I had my fair time with it, just as I did with any other proprietary fan or cooler software, and I have opinions. Out of all of them, Nexus definitely got the most user-friendly interface. Everything is to some degree explained with both images and text, and it's relatively easy to find where you need to go. And in contrast to everybody else, Hyte got humor. You will be greeted with some random funny messages, and everything is made in a, let's say, playful way. And I do like it. And sometimes there is even a good joke in there. But one thing that Hyte has done exceptionally well is the speed control. You got this interface where you can set up all kinds of curves, and then you can take a curve and apply it to either the full device or to an individual component. Ultra easy to understand, and compared to anything, by far the easiest one yet. But it is still far from perfect. In all of my time with it, I didn't have any major trouble, and after some time, I have to say it grew on me. In the beginning, I was getting a bit too much Apple style for my taste, but that really quickly faded, and to my surprise, it never crashed. I didn't get it to crash even once, which is unnatural for me. But to get to my issues, whoever decided that positioning this close button right next to the close button of the whole application was definitely a programmer and didn't run this through his designer. It's like the stupidest place you could position that close button. And the other real issue is, for some reason, my custom image that I put onto the IPS screen gets reset every time I reboot the system. Like I can reset it manually, it's still there, but for some reason it will just always fall back to default, which it just shouldn't do. And as far as issues go, that was it. a weird reset behavior and a stupidly positioned button. And if that's really all the negative I can say, which can be fixed with a single freaking update, that software is kinda good. Actually, it got a surprising feature which I didn't anticipate, and you will probably never run into it. As I am benchmarking things, sometimes, depending on what I'm doing, I have to keep swapping things around all the time or replacing them. And for the Nexus software, to recheck the system and see component swaps, all you need to do is close it in the taskbar and reopen it. And compared to the forced firmware reinstall that I usually need to do, this just works. But to cut the Nexus software part short here, I do like it. I prefer it now to the Lee & Lee L-Connect one. Nexus was in fact more enjoyable to use, especially the speed part. Hyte did a great job here. It's a quite good general purpose hardware info software because it's giving you like quite a lot of information on the system, like different temperatures, and all the things you need are relatively easy to understand. And there are still two things at this point. One is a 56 by 56 millimeter copper base, done. And the other one is the fact that there is no pump above it. Hyte went with something that they call dual harmonic pumps. And these are located on what is supposed to be the bottom part of the radiator. They are going right through, which of course comes at the cost of potential cooling power, like a freaking lot of potential cooling power because it's covering like half of the bottom 120 millimeter fan. However, my thing is, whoever came up with the name harmonic was a liar. These things are so loud. At full throttle, so 4500 RPM, these are no joke. And this perfectly shifts me into the whole how to set it up part. Just do whatever Hyte does by default. You got these performance curves that are preset and you can adjust them to be lower or higher depending on what you're trying to cool. But after playing around with this thing for a bit too long, I believe custom is not the way to go here. The fan ramping as well as the pump ramping is quite severe, and considering the max fan speed of both the fan setup and the pump, severe is just brutal. For all of our benchmarks, I did what we always do. I locked the pump to 100% and then I slowly lowered the fan speed to get the noise to performance curve that I always do. I would have done that anyway to have a good comparison to every other cooler that we have on the charts, but if I were now privately to install this into my system, for the very first time, I would not lock the pump to 100%. I would just let the AIO handle it by default. It's much more enjoyable in the long run. You get rid of all of the ramping, which is just so freaking annoying because the pump is so freaking loud at max speed. And with that being said, let's finally talk some numbers. We benchmark all of our coolers on top of a 3900K using 3 presets, 120, 250 and 320 watts. After a full burst using the respective settings, we slowly lower the fan speed in 10% steps and note down the noise to create that noise to performance curve. At 120 watts, which would be most comparable to the average gaming session, the thickest boy managed to keep the CPU at 29.1 degrees C above ambient. This puts it a solid degree in front of the Montec Hyperflow 240. But this also means that the small 240mm AIO made it into the group of excellent performing cooler. And actually, there are only 2 240mm AIOs that have ever made it that high. One is that Iceberg Thermal AIO, which was just incredibly efficient for some reason, and the other one is the Q60, which is kinda incredible considering that up here we are usually talking about 280s, 260s, 420s, and no, now we got another 240. So max performance on a low setting, absolutely excellent. And now let's get to the noise. It's really loud. Making the fans ramp up to crazy speeds created one of, if not the loudest setup I have ever measured. At close to 60 dB at a meter, it is unfathomably loud. And the unfortunate thing, in my opinion, it's not like the fans are overpowered, because if you got very overpowered fans, what usually happens is if you lower the speed, the noise drops dramatically, but the temperature stays to some degree stable because the radiator had too much anyway, and you would end up with a very straight line. For the Q60 on the other hand, the line goes down in both performance and noise in somewhat a equal way. The problem, however, it's not catching up to the other ones. So even if you make it turn slower and slower and slower to a point where pretty much everything reaches noise floor, the fans of the Q60 are at that point spinning so slow that it's not really cooling that well anymore. So compared to the Montec Hyperflow or Oasis 240, it's actually quite far behind. The only thing that it did win against for a short moment was the Aqua Fusion. There the noise to performance ratio was slightly better for a very short moment. Now given we don't have that many 240s to compare it to, but out of the four, I would have thought it would be better. And now on to some real workload, 250 watts. When actually doing something, the Q60 still managed to pull off an excellent max performance result. At 56.8 degrees C above ambient, it actually performed better than I expected, beating the Hyperflow again, but this time even a few bigger ones, like the AlphaCool T38 in 360 by the way, the Be Quiet Pure Loop 2 into 80, or even the kinda old Silent Loop 2 360. So once the heat is high enough, this small 240 performs like a damn 360. The noise to performance ratio for 250 watts looks a lot better this time. Now the Q60 is significantly better than the NMX AIO, or at least now you got a whole lot more headroom. However, it is still kind of far behind the Oasis 240 or Hyperflow 240. And on to 360 watts, a workload that not all 240s can do in the first place. At 76.6 degrees C above ambient, the Hyte now got quite some distance to the Hyperflow, and thanks to its sheer thickness and crazy fast 3000 RPM fans, it actually managed to land slightly in front of a Liquid Freezer 2 420. Wow. But for the noise, it's the same thing again. It is so crazy loud, and once you make it spin slow enough that it is to some degree enjoyable, it couldn't get low enough in noise to compete with the other 240s that are still in the race at this point. So as a product, I believe Hyte did something really cool here. The fans are crazy, the whole thing is just really cool. What you can do with it is even cooler, and for once they paired the whole thing with the software that doesn't give me cancer. So from an innovational standpoint, Hyte did a great job, and they should definitely keep working on it for a next version, definitely. But I gotta say, I was negatively surprised by the performance. And it's a complicated thing, because at least on Intel, if you make that thing go full throttle, you got a monster. That thing is definitely comparable to a 360, no doubt there. On AMD it might be different, but at least on Intel, that thing has potential, like crazy potential. But it is so goddamn loud. And to make one thing very clear, I had this thing for many weeks now, and I postponed the video again and again and again because of retesting, because I was surprised that the temps were rising as quick as they did once I made the fan spin slower. And then I decided to recalibrate my dB meter in case something went wrong there, which then forced me to retest a bunch of other coolers until I was sure the calibration was right. But no, it really is what it is. And as far as my testing is concerned, on a fixed workload, because that's how we do things, fixed max speed on everything, on my 3900K, the Q60 is an excellent max performer, really excellent, and the thing like beats 1420 and like 5360, so congrats on that. But once noise comes into the equation, it quickly fell behind, and even to a level of the average 240. And here keep in mind what I said before the benchmark section. I do absolutely recommend to use the software and let the not necessarily the default setting apply, but one of Hyte's default settings, because you will get rid of all of that fan ramping. And if you use it, it's not going to be unbearably loud. It's just not. It's going to be controlled very, let's say, conservatively. But as far as I'm concerned, I wouldn't pair this with the level of CPU that the max performance results would say are okay. A 14700K, sure, a 7900X, but I wouldn't go any higher, because I would never want to hear the level of noise that this thing can produce. But the noise is not the only issue. Except for the excellent connection part, which by the way is like really excellent. Hyte did a great job that everything is just a single cable, really cool. And you don't have like a controller like you do on some other AIOs. Everything is like built into the bottom part here. They really did a great job. But everything feels so plasticky. Moving the screen feels like I'm breaking it. The tubes are kinda too stiff and the material that they are wrapped in feels just really cheap. And the fan frame feels like it's a hollow piece of plastic, and once it's built in, it's going to be fine. You're not going to touch it every 5 minutes, I suppose, but installing it just feels, yeah, sorry, but it feels cheap. And not at all at the level that I expected it to be. So where does this leave us? I believe it's a really cool product, but Hyte needs to step things up here. The quality isn't quite where it should be. The noise is way too high or not enough performance at lower speeds. Choose your own poison. And my biggest concern is that this thing comes in at a whopping 320 euros right here and now. 320. That's by far the most expensive AIO we have covered so far. Sure, to some degree I even get the price. You get a screen and all, and doing things different, like a very proprietary custom thickness radiator, like I have not seen this. That type of stuff costs a lot of money, but 320 is still a lot. So as far as I'm concerned, for an i7 low R9, sure. That thing is going to handle your high-end gaming PC without a doubt, but I personally wouldn't go any bigger because of the potential noise. But in the end, this definitely falls into like the high-end or high-end build category. This is for the type of people that want to have the max show-off value of the PC. And in that regard, it's perfect. You can get that giant screen, you can show whatever you want to show, so sure, why not? But okay, this should be all for Hyte and their really thick Q60, and at this point a huge thank you to Hyte for sending it over. Oh, on a side note, we have a Discord server, so if you want to join, the link is down below. And we got channel membership, so if you are planning to sell your soul for an RG poop emoji, that's one way to go. But if not, I'm also releasing the content to all members 2 or 3 weeks in advance. Except for the NDA stuff, because, you know, I don't want to get sued. Additionally, you can rest assured that the income will not only keep the channel afloat, but will also serve to get the guy who does the copy for Hyte a sandwich. No clue who it is, but he deserves a sandwich. Thank you for watching, and if you want to continue, take a look at our take on the Montech Hyperflow 360. Also an excellent AIO. Hope to see you on the next one. Bye bye.